In 2053, pre-war America was experiencing an epidemic. No one knew exactly where this mysterious disease came from, but people were getting sick. And this led to scientists discovering that the disease, soon to be called the New Plague, would no matter what, eventually kill the infected, which led to the very first nationwide lockdown. America had closed its borders to the outside world, while their scientists tried to figure out how to cure the New Plague. Within a year, thousands had died, and they were no closer to finding a cure. But they did develop literature in the hopes of preventing the disease from spreading any further. And for that to happen, people needed to know what to watch out for. What did someone with the New Plague look like? Well, according to the experts, the symptoms were profuse sweating, followed by unexplained contusions and swelling, before ending with external hemorrhaging and death, as well as the additional symptom of expressing new ideals, such as socialism. I don't really think socialism and the New Plague were connected, not physically anyway, but it was a great way for the US government to register any communist or potential spy. So, now people knew what to watch out for, but what should they do in the event they were to see someone displaying one or more of these symptoms? Well, all they had to remember was the acronym C.I.R, confirm symptoms, isolate, and report. Therefore, you're walking down the street and you see someone showing the telltale signs, the first thing you had to then do was confirm the symptoms. Now, if no civil or medical professional was available to do that, then it was up to you to do it instead, meaning you now had to go up to that person and confirm that they had the New Plague. If they didn't, then you just went on with your day, but if they did, that now meant that you had just come into contact with the New Plague, and now both of you needed to isolate from the general population, as the New Plague was notoriously contagious. The third and final step was to report directly to the nearest Federal Fitness Registry or medical center, and let the professionals take it from there. Now, reporting directly sounds like you had to pay them a physical visit, which would mean leaving isolation, passing other people, potentially infecting them as well, so the professionals could take a look at you and your condition, which kind of defeats the purpose of isolating in the first place. Although these so-called professionals were kind enough to tell people how to protect themselves from the New Plague, which wasn't much. Now, the New Plague, as we know, is a social disease, meaning it is especially contagious during social interactions, so the only way to protect yourself was to avoid social interactions. Ice cream socials, cruising Main Street, promiscuous activities such as sodomy, and attending fairs or festivals. Instead, why not stay at home, enjoy a light novel and a home-cooked meal? But then again, these professionals said that if you were infected, then to get yourself back outside and pass who knows how many other people, just so they can take a look at you. It doesn't really make any sense, but there is a reason, because what they really wanted wasn't to prevent the New Plague from spreading, but for you to join the Federal Registry program, so they could work out whether or not you worked for or supported the enemy. If they really did want to prevent the disease from spreading, they wouldn't have been enticing people to get registered, where in return for your medical history, a few minor samples, and a place on the National Registry, you would receive special prizes, such as fuel rations and vacations to exotic domestic locales. So, what if those who were infected and those suspected of committing treason were specifically chosen to go to one of these locales? By removing them from major cities and towns and sending them to new locations, they were reducing the chances of government secrets being leaked, while also spreading the New Plague to new areas, meaning new people would join the register, which in turn would increase their odds of finding more spies and traitors. For instance, you have Point Lookout, a secluded coastline with a simple boardwalk consisting of a few stalls and fewer points of interest. A place you would only really go to if you were being forced to go, or if it was a free vacation, say a prize for joining the Federal Registry program. Those receiving a free vacation were undoubtedly infected with new plague, and they would pass the virus onto locals, who would then join the registry program, which would hopefully root out more spies. And those spies, as well as the ones brought here, all have to be taken somewhere secure, away from prying eyes. The Turtle Dove detention camp, for example, just north of the Point Lookout Pier, is an obvious choice. And we know that spies were sent to this camp. We know a disaster relief center was placed along the coast in preparation to register any infected, and we know that locals got sick. Take Mr. Blackhall, for instance. He died of new plague when the tourists brought it with them to Point Lookout. So I think it's safe to say, despite lacking any confirmation, that Point Lookout was one of these exotic domestic locales. However, not everything went according to plan, as certain locals, those living in the wetlands and swamps, were incredibly aggressive to all outsiders, because they knew that this strange plague was never a problem until they arrived. So they stayed well away, living in the irradiated swamps where no tourist dare venture, and through doing so, survived the plague. Meanwhile, back in major cities, rumors suggested that the new plague wasn't a mysterious disease, but a genetically engineered weapon. And this may have been close to the truth, as the government were now desperate to make a cure, more so than they already were, which is why in 2055, the US military took control of a ZAX 1.0 supercomputer, a prototype designed by Vault-Tec to govern some of their vaults. This computer was taken to an unknown location, only instead of governing a vault as intended, it was put in charge of plague and tactical research, in the hopes of one day creating a virus that would kill the new plague. Years later, China invaded Anchorage, wanting the crude oil reserves, but now desperately wanting to maintain their grasp on the pipeline, they were using advanced biological weapons against US troops. We don't know if the effects of their biological weapons were the same as the new plague, but the US knew a countermeasure was needed, and scientists were pulled from other projects, such as the Greenhouse Initiative, a project designed to control genetically modified foods to combat global hunger, but there was no point in feeding troops if they were dead. So instead, the Pan-Immunity Virion Project was formed to focus solely on mutagen research, and a brand new ZAX 1.2 supercomputer was constructed for the West-Tech Research Facility in California for biological studies, which eventually did lead to food shortages and riots, but also to the creation of the forced evolutionary virus. FEV, as we know, is a virus with devastating effects, but in the beginning it did seem promising, as subjects displayed an immunity to a wide variety of diseases. It made them smarter, it made them stronger, and even if it did fail to kill the new plague, then at the very least they would have super soldiers, or so they'd hoped. But nothing could stop the new plague. Even with extensive quarantine measures and research, it continued to spread, which was the point, but it also killed thousands of people. And these deaths fueled national paranoia, which the government used to their advantage. It discouraged assemblies, and it fueled the anti-communist sentiment. And this led to the US government questioning whether or not China was doing the same thing. What if they had their own version of FEV? What if they had their own super soldiers? So the US decided to create their own version of new plague, one that could be used to deplete Chinese forces, but not in the way you may think. With ZAX 1.2 and their best scientists preoccupied developing a cure at West-Tech through FEV, the US commissioned MedTech Laboratories, an American company focused on enabling better living through chemistry, to make a plague. You may be familiar with some of their products: Mentats, Fixer, and the Symptomatic, a revolutionary machine similar to that of the popular Autodoc, only this machine was able to handle a variety of injuries and diseases, and with the assistance of fusion batteries, it could still work during power outages and shortages. They were making breakthroughs other companies could only dream of, so it's a bit of a mystery as to why they were selected to make a virus and not a cure. Either way, MedTech got to work creating an overwhelming virus that could rival the new plague, if not surpass it, And this virus was unusual, as it only affected teenagers and children, which may have been the goal, to wipe out the next generation of enemy soldiers, leaving empty boots on the battlefield, and creating a deficiency in enemy ranks that they could exploit and take back Anchorage, and if needed, take China. Shortly after the creation of this adolescent killing plague, FEV research from Westtech was leaked to the world through an unknown source, and people started to believe that the US was responsible for the new plague. Then, before a cure could be found, and the US could release its own version of new plague, the Great War happened, facilities went into lockdown, and the world, after one final scream, went quiet. Some 200 years later, we haven't seen hide nor hair of the new plague, but there is something out there that's similar to it. A disease that starts with a fever before blue boils pop up all over the body. A disease which only attacks children, which sounds mighty familiar. Now, the director of the medtech facility was fortunate enough to be notified by head office of the incoming warheads and subsequently placed the facility into lockdown, ensuring none of their dangerous pathogens could escape. However, this lockdown authorized the use of lethal force against anyone who tried to leave, meaning all of the staff and all of their subjects were trapped inside. And while they slowly died off or became ghouls, there was someone who managed to escape. Wayne Turnquist, who didn't trust anyone to ensure his survival. Not the government, not Vault-Tec or MedTech. Instead, Wayne had taken things into his own hands. Over the summer months of 2077, Wayne constructed a backyard bunker large enough for his family, and then hacked his director's terminal, putting in a code that forwarded his logs to him. So when the director got advance notice that warheads were on their way, so did Wayne, and he escaped before the lockdown protocol could be activated, and this may have been the moment where whatever plague they had been working on was released. A virus which has survived for 200 odd years, killing any child it comes into contact with, and its latest victim is Duncan McCready. One day, Duncan was playing out in the fields behind his father's farm. The next, he's covered in blue boils and unable to move. His father, Robert McCready from Little Lamplight, has searched far and wide for a cure, but all efforts have come up short. But there is hope, as MedTech was able to create a cure for their virus called Prevent. And while side effects cause hair loss, cysts, and erections lasting for more than 4 hours, these only occur in adults, and any child given this miraculous remedy can fully recover and grow up as if they were never infected. But the same cannot be said for the new plague, and to this day, we still don't know where it came from. But in the cancelled Fallout 3 Van Buren, a non-canon answer does exist. According to Van Buren, the new plague was actually a top-secret military project codenamed Limit 115. It was a genetically engineered biological weapon developed by the United States. Scientists at Hoover Dam, working under groups that would later be known as the Enclave, created Limit 115 with the intent to deploy it against China to sterilize large portions of their population and reduce their manpower. However, before it could be used, Chinese infiltrators made their way to Hoover Dam wearing stealth suits, where inside they discovered the lab and stole samples of the virus. Quickly, scientists realized the samples were missing and raised the alarm, leading to a long chase that ended in Denver, where soldiers were able to publicly gun down the infiltrators and retrieve the samples, or at least what was left of them. In the chaos, some of the samples were damaged, and Limit 115, the new plague, was released, and this led to an epidemic, nationwide lockdown, and 20,000 deaths, with most of these occurring in Denver. While this is non-canon, in Fallout New Vegas, at Hoover Dam, inside a storage room, we can find 2 Chinese stealth suits. Likely just a reference to Van Buren and Limit 115, or maybe it's something more. Be sure to show your support by liking the video and subscribing if you haven't already for more Fallout content. If there's anything you'd like to see in a later video, leave a comment and I'll see what I can do. With that said, Thank you, as always, for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.